Welcome to On the Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsom, and I'm here to break down UFC 303, the pay-per-view event which goes down this weekend, Saturday night. And all in all, this is a really good card. The only real disappointment is that we should have had the return of the Mac, the notorious Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Of course, these two guys, were coaches in The Ultimate Fighter, and this fight's been a long time in the making. I actually feel a little bit sorry for Michael Chandler in a way, because he has put his career on hold for this fight, which I get. Every time you fight Conor McGregor, it is, as he once said, red panty night. So I completely understand it, but yeah, I feel a little bit bad for Michael Chandler. Is a fighter that, he's not exactly like in his early 20s, and he's got time to waste. He needs to be active, and I hope that he does put this behind him a little bit now and just starts to be active, because he's a super exciting fighter. But regardless, that would have been an absolutely insane fight. A fight that, I didn't put much time into from an analysis perspective, because the fight didn't end up happening. I only ever tape and do my research, my tape study 1 week in advance. So obviously that fight has been cancelled for a couple of weeks now, but it was a fight that, just pre-tape, pre-analysis, pre-research, I was very torn on. So yeah, a bit disappointed, but we do have Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka 2, the rematch for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. And then the UFC actually also added a sick co-main event as well, with Brian Ortega and Diego Lopes, which is going to be, I hope anyway, a grappler's delight type of fight. And I actually wish that was one of the UFC's non-title fight co-main event 5-round fights as well, but I do get that it's on relatively short notice. I don't think either had a full 8-week fight camp for that fight. So yeah, we'll get into all that good stuff shortly, but just before we do get into the breakdowns, as always, if you are wanting to jump into the action this weekend for the big pay-per-view UFC 303, then you can do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got everything all in one subscription. We're not asking you to subscribe to the Handicapper Advice and the Base AI UFC prediction software in 2 separate subscriptions. Everything's in one subscription. Everything's super affordable. All you've got to do is decide whether you want to pay for one event monthly or annually. Even the annual subscription is like $99. So everything is super affordable, and you get everything for every type of gambler as well. So if you're just a fun gambler that wants to hit the long shot parlays, we've got long shot parlays and parlay builders for you as well. If you are somebody that, just wants to back up your own research with the Handicapper Advice, we've got written breakdowns, recommended bets. Or if you are just someone that doesn't want to know anything about the breakdowns, anything about the analysis, you just want to tail exactly what I'm betting on, then we have an official bet section. And also included, like I've already mentioned, the full predictions, a percentage of every possible outcome of every fight on the card from Base AI, which is our UFC prediction software. Everything in one place. You can find that at MMAplay365.com. And that's the introduction done. That's the promo done. Let's get into the breakdowns. And of course, as always, we start with the main event, which in this case is for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. It's a rematch. We've got the current champion, Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka 2. And I think this is a fight that I don't know if it's going to look much different from last time out. But the one thing that I'm going to say straight off the bat, before I get into sort of any breakdown, any analysis, the narrative and what I think is going to happen, I'm going to pull this up really quickly because, I'm always transparent. I always have been. And as much as I like talking about the bets that I cash and where I do well, I can also recognise where I might not do so well. And, there's fighters every now and again that I believe, at least for me anyway, that I just struggle to just get correct. Like, I don't feel like my reads are off. I just struggle to get a correct prediction in regards to how the fights work out. One of the notorious ones for me, no pun intended, for this card was Chris Weidman throughout his career. Like, I consistently got his fights incorrect, and I actually bet a lot of those fights as well. I bet on him, I bet against him, and it just felt like every time I bet on him, he got battered, and every time I bet against him, he looked great. And Alex Pereira is not too far away from that as a fighter for me. Like, just going through his record, I'm going to write the Andreas Michailidis and Bruno Silva fights off because those were very early in his UFC career, and that was before he started really hitting the top of the division. So I'm actually going to start with the Sean Strickland fight. I bet Sean Strickland in that fight, and he absolutely killed Sean Strickland. Then in the Israel Adesanya fight, I didn't bet this fight, but I was very, very close. I was very, very tempted to bet Israel Adesanya. I just didn't manage to pull that trigger, but it was a relatively confident prediction that Israel Adesanya was going to beat Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira, of course, won that fight. And then in the rematch with Israel Adesanya, I went the other way. I bet Alex Pereira, and he lost. So at this point, I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got that one a little bit wrong. Then the one that I did get right is I bet Alex Pereira against Jan Blachowicz. I think I got Pereira as an underdog there as well, like maybe like plus 115, plus 120 or something. But man, that's probably the worst Pereira has ever looked. It got me sweating. Some people thought Jan might have stole that fight. I was on the Pereira side, but you know, it was one of those coin flip fights, and you know, if you repeat that exact same fight 10 times with a different set of 3 judges each time, you're going to get a different set of results each time. So that was the one that actually threw me off Pereira quite a lot, because I was confident that he was going to absolutely batter Jan, and you know, tough first round, we expected the wrestling, but then after that, like, Pereira had Jan Blachowicz dead to rights, and he just couldn't, like, he just looked terrible towards the end of the fight. So then I bet Jiri Prochazka as an underdog against Alex Pereira in their first fight. Prochazka won round 1, then got beat. So again, an incorrect prediction and a non-cashed bet. And then Jamal Hill, the same thing. I bet Jamal Hill as an underdog against Alex Pereira, and the same thing happened. You know, he lost the fight. So even though I'm getting, in my opinion, decent betting lines in regards to underdog money most of the time, I'm just not predicting these Alex Pereira fights, you know, correctly. And yeah, it's a little bit concerning, but I just don't think in this specific fight, I don't think much changes, because neither fighter have really advanced or elevated or declined, or they've not changed in any sort of ways. I actually think it might be better for Pereira this time than what it was last time, because he's already felt the power of Jiri. He lost that first round against Jiri Prochazka, so he's already felt the power. He's already, you know, dealt with the awkwardness of Prochazka striking, and you know, maybe Prochazka was a little bit off. Maybe Prochazka is going to look better this fight, but over 5 rounds, I just think Pereira is going to be able to find the openings on Jiri. And actually, when I broke down Jiri Prochazka and Alexander Rakic, one of the things that I was saying with Prochazka is, like, he just leaves his chin so open. He's so hittable, especially in the pocket. And he's got to change that, because if he doesn't, Pereira's just going to dead him again. And I kind of feel that that's what's going to happen here. Like I say, I know I've not got the greatest prediction and betting record on Alex Pereira as a fighter, but I just, you know, just looking back at that first fight and seeing where they've both come, if anything, Pereira's actually improving bit by bit, but I don't think it's going to be significant enough where Pereira's going to look like a completely different fighter. I just feel we're going to have pretty much the same fight as we're going to have last time. Maybe Jiri doesn't win that first round. I don't anticipate the fight going long, but if it does, I favour Alex Pereira in that long fight, because he was chewing the leg up of Jiri Prochazka. Like, Alex Pereira's got one of the nastiest low kicks in the game, and again, that's always going to be a main weapon for him, because especially with someone like Jiri Prochazka that does have that awkward movement, he does have pretty good speed for a light heavyweight as well. I will say one thing though, he took all of Alex Rakic's leg kicks, which I cannot believe Rakic didn't end up finishing Prochazka with leg kicks, because those were hard. But I think that Pereira is just a level above with those, with the accuracy of the kicks and the power that he generates in that short range. So yeah, look, like I say, I could go on forever with this. I just don't think we're going to see too much different from the last time that we saw this fight. I think that, you know, Jiri Prochazka is going to do some good work. He's going to have his moments, but Pereira eventually, I think, is going to get at him. And if it does go late, I think Pereira will just methodically break him down. Maybe a late finish, or maybe if it goes to the scorecards, then Pereira's done enough over the 5 rounds. So, yeah, I think Prochazka is going to start well. I think the fight, the longer it goes on, is going to slow down more into the pace, and with Pereira dictating that pace and the range as well. So, Yeah, with that being said, Jiri Prochazka probably goes out there and knocks Pereira out in round 1 now. But all jokes aside, look, I'm picking Alex Pereira to win this fight and still the UFC light heavyweight champion. And now the co-main event, and like I said, I wish this was 5 rounds, but I understand that, it's relatively short notice for both fighters, but it is an absolutely sick fight. We've got Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. Now, look, I was honest in the last fight, in the last breakdown with Alex Pereira, that I don't have the best prediction rate or betting rate for Alex Pereira. But on the flip side here, I absolutely do with Diego Lopes. I love Diego Lopes. He's a fighter that, when I watched tape on him when he first came into the UFC, I was impressed. And then he fought Movsar Evloev, and I was super impressed. And look, going back historically, I didn't touch that Movsar Evloev fight. Again, it was a short notice UFC debut for Diego Lopes coming in there against an unbeaten phenom in Evloev. So it wasn't, I think Evloev was like a minus 500 favourite or something as well. So it's not as if I could have played against Diego Lopes either. But man, that was a good showing for Lopes. Then in the next fight after that, Lopes fights Gavin Tucker. I think I got Diego Lopes at minus 120 there. Every man and his dog was on Gavin Tucker as an underdog, really popular underdog that week. I remember it very, very vividly because it just seemed like a flow of Gavin Tucker bets, but I was confident in Diego Lopes, and Diego Lopes went in there, and look, Gavin Tucker's a legit BJJ black belt, and what Diego Lopes did to him, I'm still in awe of it every time I re-watch that fight. How fast he changed the submissions together and wraps him up is just crazy. Diego Lopes sliced through Gavin Tucker. Then in the next fight, Diego Lopes, Pat Sabatini. So again, Pat Sabatini was a very popular bet. I got Diego Lopes, I think, at plus 110. I'm not sure what he closed at, so I got him as an underdog, which I thought was hilarious. And then again, Pat Sabatini, even as a slight favourite, was a very popular bet for a lot of people. It seemed, again, every man and his dog's on Sabatini with his wrestling credentials, and finally, Sabatini's going to have that topside grappling that's going to nullify Lopes. Lopes goes in there and destroys him. Then we go to Sodiq Yusuff. So this is again, like I said with the first Pereira-Adesanya fight, didn't manage to pull the trigger on Diego Lopes. I wanted a better line, and I was disciplined. That's my job. I've got to be when, I'm doing this for a living. So I didn't quite pull the trigger on Diego Lopes. But again, Sodiq Yusuff as an underdog was a very popular underdog, and it seemed like every man and his dog was on Sodiq Yusuff, but I was on the Diego Lopes side, and Diego Lopes went in there and destroyed him. So Lopes is a fighter that I feel like I have a very good read on. Now on the flip side, Ortega's a fighter that, again, like Alex Pereira, I just seem to have a little bit of a difficult time picking the right side of Ortega. It's not quite as bad as that, but especially in Ortega's earlier UFC career, there was a lot of fights where I bet against him, and then he's just pulled off these crazy submissions and these wild comebacks, and that's the foundation that he built himself on early on to get to where he is now. But look, both of these fighters are predominantly grapplers. They're legit BJJ black belts, and look, even though Gavin Tucker's a legit BJJ black belt, even though Pat Sabatini is a legit BJJ black belt, Brian Ortega is a different level to both of them. So this is what makes this fight super intriguing, because Lopes has never dealt with this level of BJJ black belt before in mixed martial arts. But not only that, it's a big step up in competition for him, because Ortega has fought for world championships. Ortega has been at the top of the division for a long, long time. Ortega's a fighter that has just improved dramatically in regards to his striking. I know he didn't look great against Yair Rodriguez early on in that fight, but Yair Rodriguez is a slick, lifelong striker, whereas Diego Lopes, yes, he hits hard, yes, he's super dangerous, but he's not that lifelong striker that what Yair Rodriguez is. So this is a really, really intriguing fight, because if this is a fight that both guys, and we do see it from time to time, we see it with wrestlers as well, when there's two really good wrestlers, it tends to cancel each other out and we get a kickboxing fight. The same with, grapplers here, Brian Ortega and Lopes. Do they respect each other's jiu-jitsu enough for them not to want to risk getting put on the back because they know how good their opponent is going to be on top? So then it turns into a striking fight. Well, that's a possibility. And in that type of fight, I think you've got Ortega that's definitely the better technical striker, but Diego Lopes has got that explosive striking and has got serious power in his hands as well. And Ortega has been rocked, has been dropped. pretty much has got a good chin, but he can get hurt, is what I'm trying to say. And in a 3-round fight, you can't be getting hurt too much because you haven't got those additional rounds to recover. So the striking element is really intriguing, but I do think that Brian Ortega, specifically with his boxing and low kicks, I think that he's a better technical striker. It's just that he doesn't have that explosive power that Lopes has. But if this does hit the mat, I kind of am leaning towards Brian Ortega, if I'm being honest, because Brian Ortega on his back is going to be able to get back up to his feet. Like, we've seen that a million times before. But what we have seen from Lopes is, and we haven't seen it a lot, but if you do put him on his back, he can play guard a little bit. He can stay on his back thinking that he's going to be able to do something. And a heavier guy on top will be able to, sort of smother him a bit. We saw that with Joanderson Brito in the Contender Series fight. I think Brian Ortega could absolutely replicate that if he's on top of Diego Lopes. And if, Lopes is throwing up arm bars and triangles and looking for crazy submissions like he did against Movsar Evloev, well, I don't see Brian Ortega getting caught with anything as crazy as that. He's way better than that. So I kind of feel that if Ortega decides to wrestle here, and I do think Ortega's huge for the division, and also just a quick side point, he has said that he's going to be moving up in weight after this fight, which I think he would be, absolutely massive in the weight class above. But in this current weight class, I think he's big, I think he's physical, and I think that if he can get a hold of Diego Lopes in the clinch positions, he can get him down to the mat and really, make this a difficult fight for Lopes. So, for as much as I love Diego Lopes, I've cashed on him multiple times before. I've been on him when everyone has been against him. I think this is going to be one of these fights where, a lot of people have, the public and the fans have, backed against Lopes so much that they're now going to instantly be on him because they can't back against him again. But this is going to be the fight that you don't go on him. And another scenario that happened exactly that, and I called it perfectly, was when Yair Rodriguez fought Josh Emmett. I was on Josh Emmett for years as an underdog. He's knocking everybody out and everybody's always against Emmett, but I felt like I was on an island. But then I switched up when it was Yair Rodriguez because I said this is the fight that Emmett doesn't win. And then everybody was on Josh Emmett as the underdog, and Yair destroyed him. And I think this is another one of these fights. Like, everyone's been against Lopes. I've felt like I've been on an island with him for a long time, but I think this is the fight where it's not the right time to go on Lopes. So I'm actually going to be siding with Ortega here. I'm picking Brian Ortega to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got an interesting fight here between Anthony Smith and Roman Dolidze. And the reason that I giggled a little bit there is because it's crazy how we've ended up on this fight. So initially, this fight is supposed to have been Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, but Khalil Roundtree pulled out, and then Jamal Hill got a replacement in Carlos Ulberg, which was a sick fight, and I really wish that fight was playing out. But then Jamal Hill pulled out against Carlos Ulberg. So then Anthony Smith stepped in against Carlos Ulberg, and then Carlos Ulberg pulls out injured, and now Roman Dolidze steps in. So believe it or not, we started with Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree, and we've ended up with Anthony Smith and Roman Dolidze, which is just hilarious. But look, it's an intriguing fight. It's very difficult to get an accurate read on this fight, not just because it's short notice, but look, I've never been massively high on Roman Dolidze. I've cashed him before as an underdog. I've bet against him and cashed him there as well. Cashed against him. So, yeah, I feel like I've got good reads on Roman Dolidze, and I feel like this seems to be a weird trend for this podcast. I've never really spoke about my previous betting history on specific fighters, but Roman Dolidze is a fighter that, when I bet on him or bet against him, when I bet on his fights, I tend to do a decent job. But against Anthony Smith, I'm just unsure because Anthony Smith's one of these fighters that's, super well-rounded. Again, he's fought for world championships. He's been around the top of the division for years. Super experienced. You can hear when he does his desk work as well for the UFC that he's super intelligent with his analysis as well. And you can tell that he reads the game well. He's got a good fight IQ, and he's got that veteran quality, that experience inside the cage as well. And at the times where you tend to write him off against these young, hungry fighters, he tends to prove you wrong and show that there's still a good fighter inside of there. And I genuinely believe that there's still a good fighter inside Anthony Smith. And the thing is with Roman Dolidze, he hits hard, he's got a lot of power, his grappling is absolutely insane. Wrestling, he should work on more because his grappling is so good. But the thing is, it's like, Anthony Smith's a legit grappler as well, so is Roman Dolidze really going to roll on him on the mat? I don't think so. Even if Roman Dolidze gets on top, I think Smith can do enough on bottom to potentially either work Dolidze to the point where he's expending energy or stand back up. And then even when it comes to the wrestling, I kind of think Anthony Smith's takedown defense might be better than the offense of Dolidze, but then that's the other issue because Dolidze doesn't really have too much offense with his wrestling. And then with the striking, yeah, Dolidze's got the power advantage here, and Anthony Smith's on the older side and, probably less durable than what Dolidze is, but Smith's got decent technical striking himself. The volume of Roman Dolidze is relatively low also. So I think there's opportunities here for Anthony Smith to do some good work. And yeah, initially I was going to lean towards Roman Dolidze winning this fight, but the more I think about it, the volume is just so low for Dolidze. Dolidze gets hit more than he lands, which, to be fair, you can say the same for Anthony Smith as well, but the difference is Smith's been in there with the best of the best, the elite of the elite, whereas Roman Dolidze hasn't yet, so that's a worse look on Dolidze's side. And I just feel that if this fight's close, it's going to be Smith that's the experienced veteran that's going to start making the right decisions and doing the right things inside the cage. For Dolidze to really come in here and destroy Smith, either lands a big hard punch on Smith and knocks him out clean, or he does get his wrestling going and absolutely rolls on him on the mat. But again, I can't rely on Dolidze to wrestle here, or at least wrestle enough for the fight to be won and lost within the wrestling and grappling. So yeah, I've just got a tough time picking. I think it's going to be a close fight. Look, Smith's not going to go in there and run through him, of course he's not, but I'm just having a tough time picking Dolidze here because there's traits in him that typically are just generally frustrating. Like I say, the low volume and not wrestling where he needs to get the fight to where, in my opinion, he's strongest, which is on the mat. The dude's got sick grappling, but if he doesn't wrestle to get there, then yeah, like I say, I could keep going on, but I'm just having a hard time picking Roman Dolidze here. So for that reason, I am going to side with Smith, and I'm picking Anthony Smith to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mayra Bueno Silva versus Macy Chiasson. And I don't really know what to make of this fight in regards to an entertainment level. Like, I think it's a fight that's worth matching for where both ladies are in the division, but I don't know how exciting the fight is going to be. Look, you've got two fighters here, in my opinion, apart from the Holly Holm fight, which is actually a no contest now, but Mayra Bueno Silva, finished Holly Holm and it was an impressive win. It doesn't matter what the records say. She hit that ninja choke and submitted Holly Holm and did something that not many women have done. So I still give props to Silva for that performance, but then it kind of felt like a has she peaked too soon type of fight, because she went in there against Raquel Pennington for the title to become a UFC champion, and she just didn't perform to the level where a lot of people thought she was going to after that Holly Holm fight, especially with Raquel Pennington, who, like I say, is not, I wouldn't say she's declined, but she's not as close to her prime as what she used to be, is what I'll say. But yeah, look, Mayra Bueno Silva, in my opinion, should have been winning that fight against Raquel Pennington, and she didn't. It was a bit of a disappointment. So apart from the home fight, Mayra Bueno Silva is one of those fighters that will be a fighter in a certain type of ranking in the UFC, but when she gets a step up in competition, she can look like she struggles. Not all the time, because of course she finished Holly Holm, which is super impressive. But then you've got Macy Chiasson on the other side that you could say the exact same thing about her. She's got real good qualities against a certain level of opponent in the UFC, but every time she has that step up in competition, she's not quite there. So you've got two ladies here that match up similarly in that respect. Macy Chiasson is the type of fighter that, she's tall, she's long, she's actually deceptively physical, and she'll want to tie up against the cage. And in a 3-round fight, there's always real advantages there, because you can afford to expend extra energy in a 3-round fight, and all you need is to do that in 2 rounds and then not get finished in the last round, and, you're absolutely flying. So Macy Chiasson's got a good style that I like, but I'm struggling to pick against Silva in this fight, because I do feel that Silva's not only fought the better level of competition, but she's performed better against the step up in competitions. Like even that title fight, yes, she lost comfortably, but she was competitive, really competitive with Raquel Pennington, and on another night she might have won that fight and be become the champion, whereas I don't think Macy Chiasson's quite there yet. I think Chiasson, if she tries going strike for strike with Silva, I think she can do some good work. I do think this fight is going to be competitive, but I think Silva will make the necessary adjustments in cage. And when it comes to the striking, close the distance, get inside, she's got nasty elbows, she's got good knees, and just be able to work there. And that's another thing as well. When Chiasson's tying up with her, I always like the Muay Thai style fighter in those positions because of the elbows, because of the knees. So yeah, look, the other side to this as well is if Silva takes Chiasson down, then I think Silva's going to do really good work on top of it. Whereas if Chiasson takes Silva down, I think Silva can get back up to her feet. So although I think it's going to be close and competitive, I just think that Silva's got the slight edges in more areas, and she's got the better experience in fighting much tougher competition in the UFC as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Mayra Bueno Silva to win this fight. And in the next fight, I cannot believe this fight is this low down. I thought, this is a potential co-main event type of fight. Again, I wish it was a 5-round co-main event fight as well. If you're not doing Ortega and Lopes at 5 rounds because it's relatively short notice. Although having said that, this fight is relatively short notice as well. But anyway, we've got Ian Machado Garry versus Michael Venom Page, and it's a phenomenal fight. I think it's probably the best fight on the card in regards to, the fans being, the fans talking about it, people being split on either side, which I kind of have already seen. There's people on Garry's side, but then, Garry's got a lot of haters now as well after what happened with Sean Strickland. So, there's a lot of people naturally on MVP's side, on Michael Venom Page's side because of that, which again, you can't let bias come into it, especially when you bet, and it doesn't matter whether you like a person or not, or agree with things that they've done or not. It just doesn't matter. Like, you've got to take all that out. But like I say, it's a phenomenal fight. I will say I'm surprised that we've got Michael Venom Page as an underdog again. Look, he was an underdog to Kevin Holland, which, again, that was hilarious. I cashed MVP in that fight as an underdog as well. Like, that's just crazy. And I understand there's a massive difference between Ian Garry and Kevin Holland as well in regards to quality of fighter. Well, I wouldn't say massive difference, but there's a level there, I think, in my opinion. So, I'm not saying that, MVP should be like a -200 favourite here because, there's that difference. But I'm surprised that it's not at least a pick'em. Like, I do think it's a very, very close fight. And look, with Ian Garry, I think that he's had the right build-up in the UFC. But because of that, there's a lot of fights that I'm actually going to write off for Garry in the analysis to this fight. And I'll explain why. And it's actually really simple because the level that Ian Garry's fighting here against MVP is just a completely different level to the guys that he's had in this build-up into the UFC. So, you look at his first UFC fight, Jordan Williams, then we go to Darian Weeks, then we go to Gabe Green, then we go to Kenan Song. I'm actually going to write off the fact that Ian Garry got hurt, dropped badly against Kenan Song, where on another night he might have been finished as well. So I'm actually going to write that off a little bit as well for Ian Garry. So I'm not just going to go completely one way here and just write fights off, but then talk about certain aspects within a fight that I'm writing off. So the Kenan Song's fight is getting written off as well. I'm actually going to write off Daniel Rodriguez, but I'm only going to write off that fight because Daniel Rodriguez got knocked out very early with a head kick, and then obviously was finished subsequently after. So I'm not writing the Daniel Rodriguez fight off because Daniel Rodriguez isn't a good quality fighter. I'm writing that fight off because we just didn't get to see anything at all. Like, the fight was just over quickly, which can happen in any single fight. And then you've got the Neil Magny and the Jeff Neal fight. So Neil Magny and Jeff Neal are the fights that were extended, that we got to see more of Ian Garry in those fights. And look, the Neil Magny fight, Magny is a fighter that can be really awkward for any fighter, and especially a fighter on the rise. But I think Ian Garry's cut from a different cloth in that respect, and he passed that gatekeeper type of fight, which is what Neil Magny is. And that's not disrespectful, because Magny, in a sense, decides which fighters level up and go on to being top fighters and which fighters don't, because Magny's that type of fighter. So Ian Garry beat him comfortably, and he had that step up, and then he fights Jeff Neal, and the Jeff Neal fight, he wins, and it's a split decision, and I know a lot of people will say that there's controversy in that fight, but regardless, it was a close competitive fight that ended up in a split decision, and I don't think Jeff Neal is definitely not the Jeff Neal that we had a few years ago. And actually, just using a tiny little bit of MMA math with a bit of stylistic math included in that as well, you look at what happened when Jeff Neal fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Jeff Neal got absolutely battered by Wonderboy, and yet Jeff Neal is having a close fight with Ian Garry. And the reason I bring up the Wonderboy Thompson fight is because I think that MVP, Michael Venom Page, I think that his style is the closest that we've ever seen in the UFC to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in regards to that unorthodox karate stance, switching stances, landing, decent volume, landing powerful strikes, breaking his opponents down, being difficult to hit, being elusive. He's very, very similar to Wonderboy. So, if Wonderboy's putting that type of beating on Jeff Neal, then I think MVP would do the same. But then, like I say, Ian Garry's going to close, he's going very close with Jeff Neal, and like I say, MMA math and a little bit of stylistic math, it's not always the right way to look, but I'm just trying to get whatever edge I can here. So for me, look, the way that someone's really going to have the way with MVP, and this is a reason a lot of people bet Kevin Holland against MVP, and I do get that side of it, because if you can take MVP down, he can get a little stuck on his back from time to time, and he just doesn't want to be there. But the thing is with Ian Garry, he's not that type of fighter. He's a fighter that is going to engage in the stand-up. He's going to want to knock MVP out. He's going to want to style on him. And I'm not sure it's gonna happen like that for Garry. And I think Garry might actually turn into a wrestler late in this fight if things aren't going his way and he needs to get the fight down to the mat. But again, although Gary's a well-rounded fighter, we've seen wrestling and grappling from him before, I just don't think it's going to work against MVP, especially if he turns to that late in the fight when he's not really prepared throughout his camp for that type of fight as well. I'm just not sure how successful he's going to be with it. I do think it's a fight that's going to be won and lost on the feet. And look, MVP isn't the cleanest striker from a defensive perspective. He can be hit himself. He's got his hands low, but his speed and his movement, even as he's like 37, 38 years of age now, and even his speed and movement, he moves like a young 20-year-old still. Like, it's crazy. And I just think that Ian Garry might get a little bit frustrated trying to find him. And whilst Garry is trying to land his own shots, MVP is going to be moving and popping him with a jab and hitting him with kicks. And I just feel that we're going to see a very similar fight to the one that we saw with Kevin Holland. I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive than that, but I think it's going to be the same type of fight where MVP is just going to be landing on Ian Garry, and Gary's going to try and find him, and there will be moments where Garry does find him and lands a couple of punches, but it's going to be a couple of punches over, maybe a course of 20-30 seconds compared to the rest of a round where MVP is doing good work. So I actually think that, with Gary's not going to have been tested in a way that is going to be tested on Saturday night, whereas MVP will have seen this type of fight, this style of fighter a million times before. It's just Garry is better than any of those fighters that, MVP's dealt with that style. So I think it's a close and competitive fight, but I am leading on the side of MVP here. I think that in a fight that I believe is going to be won and lost on the feet striking, MVP is an elite striker with elite movement, and I just think that that's going to matter. So for those reasons, I'm picking Michael Venom Page to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Joe Pyfer versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Now, Joe Pyfer's obviously coming off that main event, a disappointing loss for him against Jack Manson. But look, it was a step up in competition. It was a level up and a main event for the first time that didn't go quite right for him. And guess what? Not many prospects that end up in that position, maybe a little bit too early against, the fighter that's been in and around the top of the division for years, has that sort of success. And actually, I think the loss is going to do Joe Pyfer a world of good, because the next time he's in that position, he's going to be the one with experience. He's going to be the one that's been there before, and I actually think that's going to put him in a better position to win that type of fight again in the future. But it's just a case of, look, going back to the drawing board. taking a step back down in competition and going back to a 3-round fight on a big card and just slowly building yourself back up again. And I think he's doing that here. And Marc-Andre Barriault is a fighter that's got some good qualities about him, but I think this is a perfect fight for Joe Pyfer to bounce back on because, look, he's got to mind his P's and Q's. Marc-Andre Barriault hits hard, especially in those that clinch position. Those uppercuts that Barriault lands close in the clinch, they just don't feel like they've got much power behind them, but the weight that they must be landing at is crazy because he really hurts his opponents with them. So, look, for Joe Pyfer, I don't think he's going to get out-wrestled here. I don't think he's going to get out-volumed. I think he's just got to be careful of the big punches at boxing range, and he's just got to not stay in that clinch too long where he's getting hit with a stupid amount of uppercuts, and I think he'll be absolutely fine. I think he's going to be the more athletic guy here. I think he's going to be the faster fighter here. I think he's going to have more power himself, especially at range. He's the more varied striker that will use kicks as well as his punches. And I just think it's, like I say, it's a good fight for Joe Pyfer to bounce back here. I think he's got a lot of advantages in the fight. He's just got to mind his P's and Q's with the bomb coming from Barriault, and he's got to stay out of those clinch positions, which I don't think is too much to ask considering the fight in general, the fight overall, and where we're at with it. I think Pyfer's got way too many advantages outside of those two areas. For those reasons, I'm picking Joe Pyfer to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Cub Swanson versus Andrei Fili. Now, Cub Swanson, 40 years old. He's had a really, really good career in the UFC, exciting fighter, has been in some absolute wars. I'm pretty sure he's in the UFC Hall of Fame for that fight with Duo Choi as well. So, look, the dude's just like, he's a veteran, a legend, and it's great, but he is 40 years old. He is towards the end of his career now. And again, that's not being disrespectful. It happens to every fighter. No fighter fights forever. And, I don't think Swanson's a million miles away. Now, this is a weird fight because I'm kind of glad that Cub Swanson has got an Andrei Fili. And at the same time, I think it's a horrific fight for him as well. Like, what I mean by that is, look, I hate it when these 40-year-old veteran legends that you can clearly see aren't going to be around for too much longer in regards to, we're going to see Swanson in the UFC in 5 years' time. No, I don't think we are at all. So I hate to see that type of fighter against a young, hungry guy that's up and coming, that's explosive and powerful, because it's sad to see when that fighter ends up connecting with the aging veteran and the aging legend and ends up knocking them out, and it's unnecessary. And Andrei Fili's not that young, hungry buck that's coming up and that's got that explosive power. He's a fighter that's been around for years himself. And, although he's got some power, although he's got good submissions, it generally is a point scoring type of style that Fili has. So as much as I actually don't like this fight for Swanson, I think it's a good opponent that's not going to go out there and, like I say, just be this young, hungry, explosive knockout artist. But like I say, at the same time, I think it's a bad fight for Swanson because, look, Swanson's predominantly a striker, boxing heavy. Fili has got good boxing himself. He does hit relatively hard himself as well, but he's got a really good kicking game. And more importantly, is Fili switches stances and he's comfortable from both stances as well. And I think Swanson might be starting to get beat up at the body a little bit. And I actually see Fili being able to switch stances here and fire the body kick from the southpaw stance and just starting to break Swanson down from the body. Swanson's also been finished from the leg kicks as well, although that was Jonathan Martinez that does have hard low kicks. But look, Fili's got a decent low kick game as well. And I just think Fili's going to be more athletic here. I think he's going to be faster and a more varied striker. I don't think Swanson packs the lethal power that Fili's been knocked out with recently. Because look, Fili was absolutely blasted by Danny Ige. Fili was absolutely blasted by Joe Anderson Brito. He was dropped by Nathaniel Wood as well. But the two bad knockouts were Ige and Brito, and both of those hit like a truck. I don't think Swanson's got that same explosive power as what those guys have got. So I'm not so much concerned for Fili's durability, although it is in the back of my mind. I just feel that when you're looking at this fight, when we're watching this fight play out, I think it's going to be Fili that's moving better, that's got the better speed, that's in and out of range, mixing his attacks up a little bit better, switching stances, not only going to the head, but hurting Swanson to the body as well. And yeah, I just think a speed and movement advantage for a striker that's more varied. And he's also going to be taller and longer as well. And younger, significantly younger than Swanson. Yeah, I think it's I think there's a lot of upside on Fili here, even though I do prefer this type of opponent for Swanson than a young, hungry animal. But anyway, for those reasons that I've mentioned, I'm picking Andrei Fili to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Charles Jourdain versus Gian Silva. Now, this is going to be a really fun fight, an entertaining fight, I think, because both fighters love to strike. Charles Jourdain, I think, will mix things up. Silva will mix things up as well, but predominantly Silva likes to be a bully in there and charge forwards, close the distance, get in the face of his opponents and wing bombs, where he knows that if he touches the chin, he's got every chance of knocking his opponent out. But Charles Jourdain is a fighter that has said for years that, look, if he's got the right opponent in front of him, he'll just stand and strike. You know, he loves being in an entertaining fight. He loves getting hit in the face, and, you know, that's a fighter's fighter. So it's an interesting fight. What I find more interesting, though, is the betting line here, because Jourdain opened a bigger favourite and all the money's coming on Gian Silva. I just don't know what it is with the public that love Gian Silva that much. Like, yeah, I get it, he's an exciting fighter, and yeah, I get it, he's going to be in some super fun fights and he's going to win a lot of UFC fights, but I don't know whether the trend is people are thinking that this guy's going to be like a future champion and let's get in on him early as an underdog, because the likelihood of him being an underdog too many times over the next 2 to 3 years is going to be slim. I just don't know. Like, I actually had a bet on William Gomez to beat him as an underdog, but obviously Gomez had that weird botched weight cut where, it was awful and he ended up getting pulled from the card. But I think a fit and healthy William Gomez would have caused Gian Silva a massive amount of problems. And I think Jourdain's a better version of Gomez. It's just Jourdain's a favourite here. So it's like, well, what do you do? Like, if Jourdain gets to an underdog, if that money keeps coming back in and Jourdain goes to plus money, then yeah, I think I'm going to pull the trigger on it. I'll definitely pull the trigger if he's an underdog, because I think that stylistically, he's got a good style for Gian Silva. He's not going to get run over and absolutely charge down against Gian Silva like his other opponents. Jourdain's been there in there with better level opponents and beaten better level opponents. And Jourdain, I think from an MMA skill set perspective, is a better MMA fighter than Gian Silva. Yes, he's got to mind his P's and Q's, that he doesn't get hit with something too hard, but if Silva takes him down, like, Jourdain's got nasty submissions, he's submitted real good BJJ players, so Gian Silva's got to be careful if he takes him down, but Jourdain can get back up to his feet. On the feet striking is going to be taller, longer. I think he's going to have a speed advantage, and I think, and I said this with the Gomez fight as well, I think, when I broke that fight down, the moment where Silva is fighting a fighter that isn't going to feel overwhelmed or anxious or hesitant at that forward pressure and aggression, that's the moment where Silva's going to stop. He's gonna be sort of frozen a little bit inside the cage and thinking, oh shit, like, this opponent's not scared of me, what am I going to do now? And then when Silva's fighting on the back foot, I just don't think he's going to be a good fighter at this level on the back foot as what he is on the front foot, which again, he's stepping up here against the Charles Jourdain, who, like I said, in my opinion, has been in there with a better level of opponents, beaten better level of opponents than Gian Silva is himself, and that Gian Silva has fought himself. I think it's a big step up in competition, and one that I think Jourdain is going to end up winning. So, yeah, look, if Silva comes in here and wipes through Jourdain, fair enough, I'll hold my hands up. We might have something special on our hands here, but I just don't think Silva's at that level yet for this type of step up. So for those reasons, I'm picking Charles Jourdain to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the hyper-hyped fighter. We've got Payton Talbott versus Yani Ghemmouri. Now, Payton Talbott is looking pretty special. Now, I'm not the type of person that jumps on a hyped fighter train straight away. Like, I do like to see a couple of fights. I do like to see him step up in competition, maybe go a little bit longer in a fight. I like to see them face a little bit of adversity, get hit a little bit and deal with some bad positions and bad moments. And although we haven't seen everything from Talbot in that respect, I think we've seen enough now. Like, I didn't jump on a Talbot bet from a betting perspective up until his last fight against Cameron Simon, and I bet on Cameron Simon as an underdog. I think I got him at a decent number, like plus 140, plus 150, but the problem with that is that Payton Talbot made Cameron Simon look like he probably should have been plus 350, plus 400. So, the value after seeing the fight, which, 2020 hindsight is a great thing. But yeah, look, Payton Talbott just looked phenomenal against Cameron Simon, who in my opinion is a very good fighter. I think Cameron Simon's a better fighter than Yani Ghemmouri, and this is the reason why we're seeing Payton Talbott as a minus 2,000 favourite. Yani Ghemmouri's nearly at plus 1,000 in some books. So yeah, it's Talbott's a big favourite, and I kind of think that, look, I'm not going to say he's going to cover minus 2,000, but I think he's going to look like... The dude just looks special. He hits hard as fuck. He's fast. He's elusive. Combinations, mixing kicks in with his punches. He's got good wrestling. He's got good defensive wrestling. He's got good grappling. He's got good defensive grappling. He's a fighter that just did not slow down, even though he put a ton of volume on Cameron Simon. I think that Talbott is the full package, and again, I think the UFC have gone back to, he's beaten Simon. I think this is a slight step down in competition, but it's a fight to get him out on a pay-per-view, a big pay-per-view type of card, start building him up in the right way, because I think Talbott is going to have a very bright future. Obviously, there's absolutely nothing you can do with a minus 2,000 favourite in MMA. But I do think Talbott's the goods. I think he's going to style on Ghemmouri in this fight. Ghemmouri's predominantly a striker. He does have a little bit of wrestling and grappling, but I just think he's outmatched everywhere. I don't think he's going to win this fight wrestling and grappling Talbott, which means that Ghemmouri's going to have to stand and strike. And we've seen Talbott in some bad positions already. We've seen him hurt, we've seen him hit, we've seen him bounce back, we've seen him fight through the adversity. I don't think Ghemmouri's going to show him anything he's not seen before. Yes, Ghemmouri might have some moments, but I think Talbott's going to buzzsaw him here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Payton Talbott to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Michelle Waterson-Gomez versus Gillian Robertson. I feel like this fight has probably been in the making for years, even though we didn't know it, but it just seems right. It seems like the perfect fight on the perfect type of card. Michelle Waterson-Gomez is a pay-per-view girl. She's been around for years. She's always seems to be on these big cards, and she's a veteran at this point, and that always comes with some positives inside the cage, because she's seen every possible style over the years. She's fought the best of the best. She's been at the top of the division for so many years. And Gillian Robertson, I think this is a good fight for Robertson as well, because look, she's on a pay-per-view. She's stepping up in competition in regards to like rankings and being in there with a fighter that's beaten so many good girls over the years. And yeah, I think it makes sense for both ladies. I do like Gillian Robertson here, though. I think that Michelle Waterson-Gomez isn't the fighter she used to be, I don't think she's massively declined. But what I feel is this MMA game evolves over time, and it's just like how, I was watching tape the other day, and the commentator, I can't remember who it was talking about full mount. It was, like you look at 10 years ago, a fighter gets full mount and the fight's going to be finished very soon after that full mount's been taken. Whereas now, if a fighter gets into full mount and they posture up, they're just going to get reversed and the opponent's going to escape. You weren't seeing that 10 years ago. So the game evolves. This MMA game evolves so much over, certain years. And I kind of feel that Michelle Waterson-Gomez has a great style for maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Whereas now, things have changed, and I just don't think her style has moved with the times. That doesn't mean she's not going to keep winning fights, because she's a good quality fighter. But I just think Gillian Robertson is more of the here and now. I think that Robertson is going to be very physical as well for this division. I just don't think that these, heel kicks and the head and arm throws, I just don't think that that's going to be a game plan that's going to work well against Robertson, because if you head and arm thrower, Robertson's scrambling and grappling ability from bottom, and I just feel that, look, if Waterson-Gomez head and arm throws Robertson, she's got a very good chance of losing a back position, and Robertson will probably find a rear naked choke or get very close. And when it comes to a striking, I think the fundamentals of Robertson, hands up, standard boxing against the spin attacks of Waterson-Gomez, like I said, the heel kicks and all those sort of stuff, I just think that Robertson's going to be able to deal with that. So yeah, I think it's a good fight for Robertson. I think she's going to cope on the feet with Michelle Waterson-Gomez, but I think when it comes to defending takedowns from Waterson-Gomez, I think she'll be fine there. But when it comes to the offensive wrestling, I think she'll be able to get Waterson-Gomez down as well. I don't think she'll hold her down straight away initially, but I think the longer the fight goes on, the better and more success that Robertson will have in that respect. So for those reasons, I'm picking Gillian Robertson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the heavyweights. We've got Andrei Arlovski versus Martin Buday. Now, obviously, Martin Buday is coming off that disappointing fight last time out. And I think it was more disappointing for the fact that a lot of fans expected much more from Buday. Like, Buday was a slight favourite against Shamil Gaziev, and a lot of people were still backing Buday as that slight favourite. I went the other way. I bet on Shamil Gaziev, and, it was pretty much a wrap from the moment that the referee said fight. And again, that's another disappointing aspect of the fight, because it looked like Buday just froze in there, just didn't do anything, and he just allowed Gaziev to just go wave on wave on wave, and eventually Gaziev just got Buday out. I'm surprised it wasn't finished sooner, but Buday showed some toughness, he showed some durability, he didn't quit on himself, eventually he just got broken down. So there's some slight positives to take out of it, but all in all, it was it was a performance that was very unlike Martin Buday. He's better than that. Now, with Arlovski, I say it time and time again, he's one of these fighters that, we thought was over the hill. We thought his chin was a glass chin years ago, and then suddenly his chin starts to improve and nobody's knocking him out anymore, although he has been knocked out once or twice in the last couple of years. But Arlovski's a fighter that's got so much experience, so much veteran qualities about his game, and he's got this aura where he can just slow any fight down to his own pace. And pretty much every fight, he makes his opponent fight at his own pace. The thing is with Buday, I don't think Buday is like a wild mover anyway. So, I think Arlovski's made difficult fighters that have got a speed advantage with difficult movement to deal with slow down and fight his pace. So I think Buday is going to slow down and fight his pace anyway. I think that'll suit Buday as well, which is one of the reasons why I'm leaning Buday here. But the thing is with Arlovski, like I say, it's going to be close, it's going to be competitive, you're probably going to get a split decision, and it's one of these fights where, if it does go to a decision, which I anticipate it's going to, we're going to be sat there thinking, well, we've got no idea which way this is going to go. It's just going to be one of these close and competitive fights. However, if there is a knockout, I do see it more on Martin Buday's side. But like I say, I think it's going to be a low volume, striking affair. Maybe Buday tries to mix up a little bit of wrestling here and there, but it's not going to be something, in my opinion, that determines the winner and loser of the fight. I just think it's going to be a low volume, close, competitive fight that probably goes to a decision, probably a split, and we've got no idea which way it's going to go. But like I said, I think a fight like this might favour Buday, where he can just land the bomb, keep landing the harder shots. So Arlovski might be pitter-pattering with a jab, and he might get slightly more volume than Buday, but it's going to be Buday landing the bigger action strikes. And I think if you're forcing me for a prediction, which of course I'm always going to, I'll never sit on the fence, I'm going to favour the bigger action strikes over maybe the slightly more volume from Arlovski's side. So for those reasons, I'm picking Martin Buday to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Carlos Hernandez fighting the newcomer Ray Tsuruya. And Ray Tsuruya is a really, really interesting prospect, 21, 22 years old, looks like a phenom, looks like somebody like Tatsuro Taira when Taira was sort of, say, 5 years ago. Like, Tsuruya, you can see that he's still very, very green in regards to his MMA game, but man, he's still so good. Like, he's got good qualities about him, even though he's green, which shows that he's probably going to be a bit of a prospect. I think he's a junior Olympic wrestler, or it's something along those lines, but his grappling's really slick as well. Again, reminds me a lot of the type of grappling we see from Tatsuro Taira, and I think this is going to be the first step in a good build-up in the UFC for Tsuruya, because look, Carlos Hernandez isn't an easy out. Like, Taira had a little bit of issues with Carlos Hernandez early in their fight before he knocked him out and took over. Well, not took over, but won the fight. And I think Tsuruya is going to be able to get at Hernandez in similar ways. I think that Hernandez is going to do good work striking. I think Hernandez is probably going to be the slightly better striker here. But the thing is with Tsuruya, he ducks under the strikes really well to level change into takedowns, and he knows what he wants to do. He doesn't fuck around striking thinking that he's just going to strike and see how it pans out. He knows where he's good. He knows that his background's wrestling. He knows that he's got slick grappling. He's seen Carlos Hernandez lose against a very similar type of fighter in Tatsuro Taira already. So it's no secret to what Tsuruya is going to want to do here, and I think he's one of these types of fighters that will stick to a game plan, which is always good to see. And like I say, Tsuruya's still a little bit green, and when he levels up in competition a little bit more, I think that's where we'll see him challenged a little bit. And I think we're going to see him challenged here within the striking. It's just, I think he level changes and gets the fight down to the mat pretty early, and then just looks really good on top of Carlos Hernandez. So yeah, look, I'm not sure if I quite agree with the betting line, like Tsuruya's minus 400 to 500, I think. So I'm not sure it should be that high, but I do think he wins the fight and looks good doing so. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ray Tsuruya to win this fight. And in the next fight, the last fight to break down, which means it's the first fight on the card, and I've got no idea why this is the first fight on the card. I say it all the time. We've got Ricky Simón versus Vinicius Lockdog Oliveira, and man, what a debut Lockdog had. You know, it looked like he was struggling a little bit at times. It was the debut of both fighters against Sopai, but then man, that flying knee when Sopai was already a little bit hurt and a little bit tired in round 3, that flying knee was vicious. Highlight reel knockout. That'll be on Oliveira's tape for life. And yeah, man, Lockdog's fun. And this is a huge step up for him. Like, the UFC aren't messing around with Lockdog here. Like, putting him against Ricky Simón in his second UFC fight, like, wow. Very, very surprising. And look, I think if this was in 3 or 4 more fights for Oliveira, so if Oliveira was on a 3 or 4 fight win streak in the UFC, maybe it's a bit better for Oliveira. Maybe it's, closer in regards to experience and, skill set. And obviously Simón will be 4 fights older at that point as well. But I think right now, I don't know. I struggle to see Oliveira doing great work in this fight. Like, I think he might be the better striker. Like, I think he's definitely going to have more power. And the one thing that Simón's had an issue with over the years is durability in regards to getting hit and being able to withstand powerful strikers, which is what Vinicius Oliveira is. But Ricky Simón's wrestling, like, again, Ricky Simón's one of those types of fighters. He knows where he wants fights. He's got 3-round cardio for days whilst he's relentlessly wrestling. Although he did tire a little bit earlier last time out, but I think he was met with a lot of resistance in that fight from a wrestling and grappling perspective that he doesn't normally face, and I don't think he's going to be met with too much resistance wrestling and grappling from Oliveira. So I think that this is the type of fight that obviously every fight starts standing, and I think Vinicius Oliveira is going to come out here. I think he's going to land a couple of hard shots on Simón that's going to wake Simón up very quickly. That's only going to get Simón's wrestling going, though. I think Simón relentlessly wrestles here, puts on a wrestling clinic, rinse, repeats, chain wrestles against the cage, tires Oliveira out just by sticking to him like glue, drags him down, Oliveira stands back up, and Simón changes position for a different takedown, goes from a double to a single, takes him down again. Guess what? Oliveira stands back up again, and then Simón trips him down to the mat. Oliveira stands back up again, and then Simón's on the back, and he lifts him up and throws him. It's going to be one of those types of fights that I think that Simón's going to use his cardio as a weapon. Oliveira's going to tire out quicker than what Simón will. That's going to take the power away from Oliveira once he's tired. That's also going to make Oliveira hesitant when it comes to the striking, and it'll be a case of trying to land a knee, a flying knee or an uppercut as Simón's trying to level change onto a takedown and trying to find that small window of opportunity, the low percentage outcome of just connecting at the right time, and I'm just not sure that time comes. So I'm going to side with the veteran here, and I'm picking Ricky Simón to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. I think it's been a fun one, if I'm being honest. I've really actually enjoyed breaking these fights down and talking a bit about different things, like I say, with my betting history in regards to specific fighters that I do really well on, fighters that I generally don't do as well on. So yeah, there's been a fun extra few elements that I've not really spoken about before, but I'm really looking forward to the card. It's 1 or 2 fights that I think are not going to be that entertaining, but all in all, I think it's a decent card that's going to provide for us, provide entertainment, provide good moments, knockouts, finishes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. As for the podcast itself, thank you as always for tuning in. Thank you guys for, if you're on YouTube, just subscribing to the channel as well. I really appreciate it. It really helps the channel. If I ever help you with my analysis, my predictions, or help you cash your bet, then just repay me by subscribing to the MMA Play 365 channel, and that's great. And like I said, one more time, if you are wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com, where we've got everything in one subscription. All you've got to do is choose the length of the subscription. Doesn't matter what type of gambler you are, we've got something for everybody in every single package. All you've got to do is go onto MMAplay365.com. It's affordable. Get at it today. Have some fun this weekend. Bet responsibly, bet safe. Don't bet more than you can afford. And let's win the bets. Let's cash your tickets. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. We'll see you again next week.